Welcome to the Susan Sheehan podcast. This is Susan, and welcome to a special episode. Today we're joined by Norma O'Kelly, and a fellow woman from County Limerick.
You.
Welcome, Norma.
Thank you so much, Susan. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking your time, and thank you for coming in today to share your story.
Thank you.
Norma and myself, I guess we know each other really through my sister. And
Yeah, but we met each other even outside of that realm.
we did, which I'm just literally has just popped into my mind. We have to tell the story.
Yes.
I was living in London. I was just starting off my entrepreneurial world, I suppose. And there was a woman called Lou. I can't remember her surname, but she ran an event.
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah, she's back again, actually. Anyway, she ran this event for female entrepreneurs. I think it was female. Yeah.
It was.
And I volunteered. And this woman came in. I was at the door greeting people and giving them their badges. And this woman came through the door. And who was it? Only Norma. We'd never met.
We didn't know each other. We didn't know each other. But it was like, oh, an Irish person is here in London. Another Irish person is here.
Yeah, that's right. And then, oh yeah, that was it. And then I took a photo of the event and put it up on Instagram.
And so did I.
And you took a photo of the same event. And my sister was like, and she must have both of us.
Yeah.
And, hey, you two know each other.
We met.
I know you. I know both of you. We didn't know.
Yeah, we didn't know. It was such a, it was definitely a meant to be kind of scenario of, wow, I love that. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe these things happen for a reason. And that day was just like, wow, love the power. Especially when you're in London. I know you lived in London for a long time, but I used to only go over for work. And I wouldn't, other than the Irish that were traveling with me for work. And actually, there was a fabulous Brazilian woman with me that day, Bruna, who worked with me. And it was a very memorable day and just that whole scenario. But even following on from that, Susan, I was saying to you that because you were doing webinars and you were like, this is like 2 years pre-COVID, and you had these fabulous women's circles online. And I think subsequently later that year, my mum was diagnosed with cancer, and she was, this time 6 years ago, she was into her final months, and you had a few things on, and I'd already qualified as a coach, even though I was still working, but I was taking time out. I remember joining one or two, and I thought it was such a ray of light that there was other women, because I didn't feel there was anything like that in Ireland at the time, because it was all in person. It wouldn't have been online. And and there was one or two people that spoke that day that I'm still on their subscription lists. And yeah, really, really, really moving. And really, you held space so well. Like, it was just something that, it was just a ray of hope when I was in I suppose, a lonely place caring for somebody who's dying, into those final months, this time of year as well, if I recall. So yeah, it was a thank you, Susan, for your past version of yourself who was doing those things with such ease, and I was in such awe of what you were doing. And yeah, there you go.
Thank you for sharing that. You never know the power of sharing, or just even women even gathering, right? Just
so much.
You don't know the ripple effect that it has, which is what I believe we both desire actually from today.
Yeah.
And thank you for saying that I used to hold it with such ease, but there used to be panic in the background before I'd finally sit down to actually hold those on.
Wouldn't have known.
I know. And you know what? I think most people are like that. They're like this last minute
this one
of nervous kind of an excited anticipation, which I've had today. And I've had for a good few hours today, knowing that we were going to speak this afternoon. So, do you want to just, I guess, for anyone that doesn't know you, do you want to introduce yourself and where you're from, and then we'll dive into your story whenever, whatever way.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Susan. So I am, and it's even hard to say I am, because I'm more than what I do. But right now I'm a transition coach. So, and I work with men and women who are in transition in life and in career. I am from Limerick, very proud Limerick woman, and have lived in Dublin 19 years this winter. Yeah, I'm in 19 years gone from Limerick, and but Limerick is very dear to me. Look forward to being at home for Christmas, and yeah, I'm a country girl at heart, very much a country girl, and although I was in corporate for 22 years and survived and the odd time thrived there, I would say my heart always belonged to helping others in a really more meaningful, kind of purposeful way. So, retraining as a coach while I was still doing marketing years ago, I stumbled into this work and now do it full time, which I absolutely love. Suppose the brief headline copy is I was diagnosed at 28 with very, very aggressive endometriosis, grade four, after a very traumatic and emergency surgery where I lost my right ovary and right fallopian tube at 28 and was told there and then by a general surgeon, not a gynae or not anyone trained, that I wouldn't have children. And I was 28. Bizarrely, I live right beside that hospital that it happened in, that I was brought in an ambulance. And it was, yeah, it changed everything. But it really, the, I suppose the alarm bells went off at a very young age. I was 11 when I got my period. And it was a time where, it was a lot of shame. I didn't even know what a period was when I got one.
I
I
know.
wasn't expecting it. I was so young. And it was always hush hush, except you couldn't hush away mine because I was in such pain and I used to get very, very, very sick every month. And the pain had even begun from that age, the kind of said alarm bells were kind of going off very early, but I really pushed it away because it was a shameful place, blood was, and to associate pain and blood, it was just something that, it just wasn't allowed or welcomed. I don't think not by any fault of my mother's, just more society at the time. And yeah, so that's kind of the headline copy, and then I'll tell the rest of the story, kind of what happens as I journeyed through that from 11 to 28 and 28 onwards. I'm now 46. Next year 47. So yeah, yeah.
And
But a
so it
lot of
was,
wisdom and lived
yeah,
experiences in those years.
yeah. Thank you. So it was from the very beginning. I mean, most girls would find the first few years can be quite, few years of your period can be quite irregular, and then
Mm.
can take a while to settle down. But
Mm.
yours was just was it
Full blown regular, but like at the age of 11, I was probably having the period of a 30-year-old woman, like it was very, very, very full on. Um, like crippling. Like my mother's solution to everything was she was a great woman. She really, really loved her fitness. She was doing yoga like in the 80s in Limerick City when nobody was doing yoga. And she was a real believer in exercise and good food. And for her, movement was the recipe for wellness. And she'd say, get up on your bike now, go for a walk. And like I would be bent over, crippled in pain, unable to do anything. I would vomit, like I was nauseous, I would faint, you name it. Like they were really, 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 really strong from the get-go. I remember when I started secondary school, they went in to tell the nuns that I would probably miss a day a month every year. Or yeah, and I think that might have been the case. And at a certain extent, my mother was right because I found hockey and I played hockey 7 days a week. Like I was sporty spice. I was sporty spice with a grunge kind of cool side of it. I wasn't into the Spice Girls. They were later. We were older than that. We missed that. But I was somebody who, yeah, I did honor, I suppose, my mother's wishes. But I also loved hockey, and there was years kind of from 13, 14 to 19, 20 that it had settled because I did really, really, I suppose I wasn't mentally aware of compassion or any of those things that we talk so freely about now, but I threw myself into sport and that did keep things more regular and I didn't have the pain. But if you added a little dose of stress like exams or I used to do like debating, public speaking. I remember going to I was doing a really, really big presentation in the RDS or in Dublin and we were staying in families kind of dotted around Dublin like that were, hosting us. And I was speaking up in front of 600 students that day, and I got my period that morning when I woke up in this stranger's house, like a strange family house in the middle of nowhere in Dublin, and we were getting the bus in, and didn't I puke all over myself on the bus? And all my friends, you wouldn't even tell your friends you'd your period back then, like you were
Mm,
nearly embarrassed to
no,
say. But I remember my best friend in McDonald's on O'Connell Street in Limerick trying to clean the puke off me so I'd get up and stand on the stage, which I did. But it was a mixture of the stress and like everything and period and and like bus, like throw in when you just wanted to be in bed with your hot water bottle.
of
So
course.
yeah, I've really some really kind of traumatic memories of getting periods in my teen years, even though I didn't have as bad a pain as I had kind of either side of it. And but I sure look, we didn't even know what endometriosis was or a bad period was. Do you remember Feminax was kind of starting to come out? My mother wouldn't even allow me to take one of them.
What was
Paracetamol if
that?
you were lucky. It was this, I think maybe it was even when we were in our 20s. Feminax was a paracetamol and very clever, like put pink packaging on it and kind of Buscopan kind of equivalent. So it's kind of treating IBS and pain. And it was this revolutionary drug, doesn't even exist anymore. But it had a pink, like talk about like the pink tax, like fuck's sake, like, when you think about it. But God, it was like liquid gold in our 20s. Feminax, yeah. Remember?
Oh,
Like, when you were old enough to go to a chemist for yourself, like you didn't have to ask your mother for drugs. But the odd time I remember taking out the old Ponston, right, that she might have got from a sister or something, like the horse
I
tranquilizers
remember
for
that.
me. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I lived on Ponston probably for my 30s after being diagnosed.
that
And I
was
was very,
strong. Ponston is strong, right?
and they were big, like you'd
Yeah,
even struggle to swallow them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But they were my soft drug for like a lot of my 30s, late 20s, early 30s. I lived on Ponston and paracetamol. Like when I think now, I hardly take paracetamol maybe, which is so lovely. But I lived on painkillers like for 10 years more. Yeah, really, really bad.
What is it? What is it like? Because a lot of women are getting diagnosed with endometriosis now.
Yeah,
What does a week, a month of it look like? Is it
it's
constant?
so different.
Is it?
No, it's so different for every woman. Can I say that? Because obviously in the medical field, they've graded it 1 to 4. You could have somebody with grade 4 with no pain, but very, very, very bad adhesions, but they just are asymptomatic. I know a woman who had grade 4. She found out when she was trying for children when she had like only a laparoscopy can diagnose it as well. People are told, oh, you've endometriosis, but I'm like, you really don't know until you go in. But for getting back to your question, it's very, very different. Although I had grade 4, I had a very aggressive and symptomatic version of it. But you could be a grade 1 and have the same pain as a grade 4, but you might have a very localized part of within your whole abdomen. Um, so mine was, of course. Sure, if you're going to get anything at all, get the right one. Get the right one.
Don't do it by
And I
half.
laugh
Yeah.
now. Yeah, yeah, I laugh now because I can. But like, feck
Yeah.
me, there was times was like, of course, I had to get the worst one. So, yeah, the build up just before your period, the cramps would start, um, and it would be yeah, very, 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 very aggressive. Um, like by the day, the day of the period, or that first day, you'd be bent over like hot water bottles, possibly yeah, nauseous, like kind of really, really weak. Like I'd be very pale, I'm pale anyway, but I'd be very pale. Like I'd be kind of washed out. Um, and um, and then that would ease off, but you'd still probably be on painkillers. You'd be very, very heavy cycles, clotting, like you name it. And that would ease off, and then you'd kind of get that, in that next phase, the cycle, that kind of energy again. So you'd be flying it, like you'd be like, geez, a new woman. And then it would start again for your ovulation. Like you'd get the cramps and the pains because they're chocolate cysts can be on the ovaries. So like they're filled with blood. So and if you had a chocolate cyst that burst, my God, would you know it? Like that's when it's like literally like think of paint exploding in a room, but it's hot blood. It's like lava, and I had like one of those burst cysts a few times in my life, and like it plays out in the years that I didn't know. It's like it's a really long diagnosis. Like it could be up to 7 to 11 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis. I would have gone to the doctor and I was told I had a kidney infection. Like for years, it was like you had kidney infections. Um, but and again, I've spoken about this, and it's been a while since I've spoken about it. But what triggered my kind of the episode, because any OSIS diseases are inflammatory diseases, is stress, is trauma, and where mine kind of began to fester again. I was living in Cork, and I met a guy who ripped me off, a guy I was seeing, and he stole money from me. And I'm making a very like long story very short because I want to talk about more the cycle and the what happened as a result. But um, that triggered a big inflammatory like I suppose episode. And I went to every known doctor in Cork at the time, and it was like, no, you just have bad periods, get over yourself, and a bad kidney infection. But I would say around that time, I probably had one of those kind of cysts that burst, and that would happen at ovulation, because normally, obviously, the the egg is ready to be released, or the cyst is released and an egg is released, whereas that's just releasing like hot blood, which is scarring your abdomen. But it wasn't until I moved to Dublin, and of course, like drinking, having the crack. I lived really, really near Leeson Street. Great woman for a party. Like actually had lived with a girl from Ballyhaig. Sheila, she's still a good friend, and we probably had absolutely savage parties in this absolute kip of a house in Donnybrook. And we used to walk home from legs, and I was studying part time. I was working for Nokia Mobile Phone, who were at their height. Like it was the height of Nokia. So I used to travel. I used to go to Finland. I was doing my masters by night. Your man, the dickhead that had ripped me off, that had been kind of 18 months previously. I'd left Cork, kind of very upset, and had started this life again in Dublin. And I was eating absolute shite as well. So like diet is very critical with inflammatory conditions, that you
Yeah.
wouldn't be having too much dairy or too much wheat. And I was doing all the wrong things. I lived beside Donnybrook Fair, and like their secret sauce was like butter and cream. And I was piling on the pounds. I wasn't exercising. I was studying. I was drinking. I was having like the time of my life. I thought I could do it all. I genuinely, it was that like, because you're in your 20s, you can
Yeah.
do it all.
And
Like
you're
you
meant
can,
to be, and to some
yeah.
extent, you are meant to be during your 20s. This is your
Exactly.
peak of,
This is your fun. Exactly. It's
yeah,
fun time.
yeah,
So, yeah, so, and then it was the summer, and no, yeah, I didn't have to write my thesis. It was 2 year master's part time. And, I remember like, yeah, getting a kidney infection. But this time I went and got really good scans in the Beacon, and they were like, look, this looks like endometriosis, and it looks very aggressive. You have a very big cyst, a big chocolate cyst on your ovary. You need a surgeon. And they kind of laughed. They were like, "Good look at that. It's summertime." And I remember I had a surgeon booked in the regional in Limerick, actually, or UHL as it's known as now. And I was to get down to Limerick. I couldn't get any of them in Dublin. But a favour, somebody pulled in some favour, don't you know now? Like you always know somebody who knows somebody. And I was all set to see this person in Limerick in whatever, 2 weeks' time. And I'd say 2 days beforehand, I fell down and collapsed in my house in Donnybrook. Um, and my cousin had to come over and call an ambulance. And that's when, like, really life changed from that moment I got into that ambulance. And although I look back with compassion for that poor young girl, like at 28, I really was still so young and naive.
mm,
Um, it was probably in so many ways, and not to sugarcoat it, but it was meant to happen, because everything changed after that point. It had to change. Life had to change. Um, and so much anger and hurt still as well for the man I call the vet, because like it was emergency surgery. I went into cardiac, like I was in resus, my heart. The cyst had contorted itself all around the ovary, the right ovary and the fallopian tube, so it was causing a heart attack basically. Because I was in so much pain, and they wouldn't believe me. They were like, "This is an ectopic pregnancy." I was like, "It's fucking not, I wish." Like there was nothing like, and because it was in a general hospital, they're not like general hospitals are not specialists, not unless they have a very strong gynae department. But in Dublin, The gynaes are the maternity hospitals when it's with in itself is a problem
Hmm.
because when you're somebody who isn't having children, it's not where you want to be. Is beside everybody else who's having children. But yeah, the general hospitals are general surgeons. So this man was an elderly man, and it was a double cesarean cut. There was nothing laparoscopy done back then. Like it was save her life. Like I was really, 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 really ill. A lot of post-traumatic stress. I remember a lot of it. The day, remember my brother came in to hold my hand. I screamed down A&E like I was 10 out of 10 pain. Like if people say, how's your pain levels, after, even after having, and I suppose multiple surgeries after that, I've had so many surgeries, nothing was ever as bad as that day. That was horrific. So very traumatic. And yeah, to be woken up to be told, yeah, you won't have children. You've this very aggressive condition. You will require more surgery. We'll be sending you to a specialist and we're putting you into sudden menopause. I didn't even know what fucking menopause was at 28. I didn't know anything.
28. So you
Yeah,
no, you wouldn't know.
so
Why
young.
would you know anything about menopause? And back
Was
then,
it
I wouldn't
back
even
then? Yeah,
you
it was
wouldn't even know what a
2000,
menstrual cycle is back then.
2007. I did because of, I suppose I did biology and I was really interested. But also because of I'd had shit periods all my life, so I always knew about my cycles and stuff. So, but I didn't know enough about them, but I knew, enough. Um, but yeah, geez, yeah, 2007. So, it's July 16th, 2007. Yeah, I remember the date really, really well. And it's like my body knows every mid, every July. It's like the body remembers, that trauma. But what happened subsequently, both mind, body, everything, and it wasn't immediately, but everything had to change, as I said, and it did, and it did. Yeah,
Yeah. A real and almost taking a pause there to
mm.
recognize that
Yeah,
and of course these are only we can only reflect on those moments afterwards, right?
yeah, 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 with
And
love and compassion, and allow the anger as well. Allow the fuck you, because that man, he became a totem for, I'd say, a good 15 years to prove him wrong. I was going to have children no matter what he said. you
okay.
know um like what did he know about my life, or what did he know about medical science, or what did he know? But like I remember that summer, I had to go, had to move home. I couldn't walk, like I couldn't tie my shoelace. My mother was showering me like I was very, very ill. And my employers at the time, Nokia, were so good. Like honestly, like even the people back then, from my life back then, like they're still such good friends. My old boss, everybody, like everybody was exceptionally amazing. But yeah, there was the start of the rebuild, but there was that, will I freeze my eggs at 28? Like, and back then again, like there was IVF was everywhere, because like the IVF thing obviously was, I think, 80s, was it? Yeah, or 90s.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was even starting to consider freezing my eggs at 28. I remember that. But I remember when I did eventually meet my who became a surgeon for a long number of years, she was like, your body couldn't even be put through that. Your body has been through too much.
Too
You
much.
couldn't start a cycle. Yeah. So I was in menopause for, um, I think around 6 months after that. They put me into like total menopause, which is the same drugs as women who are going through breast cancer treatment. And I had HRT, yeah, at 28, and it was fucking awful. Like you're getting over a massive surgery, your hot flushes, like it was just, yeah. And I remember meeting an aunt of mine. He said, your father's very upset. And I was like, is he now? Is he? I was like, don't remember him saying anything to me. Your father's very upset. Yeah, that I couldn't have children. That's what he was focused on. And like to hear that given back to you, like that it was your fault, like that's what I interpreted it as, that I've disappointed the family. That was a sucker punch I really didn't need at that time. So yeah, there was so much going on, but I will say it was a real wake up call of I couldn't continue to live the way I was living, in terms of there was a, yeah, grief of losing that kind of person before that surgery and afterwards. I had to learn self-care. I had to learn, like, even not just appealing to the mind, but the whole body needed care. And acupuncture entered my life. That was the first kind of Eastern kind of, philosophy that really, really supported me. And there was a woman across the road from Hollis Street. She's very famous. I think she's still there. And you'd walk in and the smell of the Chinese herbs. Like I still can't do cinnamon because I used to do enemas, like
Uh,
cinnamon enema. Yeah, like again, imagine like, and again, I'm so grateful to Sheila. We ended up living together in another house. Like she saw me through so much, in those years. But imagine boiling like pots of fucking Chinese herbs to like do any like awful stuff, like when everybody else was going out. And then I had to write a thesis and a master's in the middle. But again, it was great. There was things like I could focus on and control, control the controllables when the shit hits the fan.
yeah.
And my job, they were really good to me. They even promoted me, I think, the following year, just to give me a bit of purpose. And then the second thing that
You
I
shared it with them, Norma.
oh,
What you
they
thinking?
knew, yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, all the men in that team were brilliant. They never were like, "Oh God, no, we wouldn't talk." Now they didn't openly, but they always were like that. That was awful. What has happened to you? That's really awful. They all acknowledged it. Do you
Which
know?
is
They
incredible going through something like that, that you didn't have to keep
honestly,
that secret.
no, no. And the team there were they're still good mates. Like they were just yeah, legends. No, they were really everyone really openly acknowledged what I was going through. They couldn't, but like I was so unwell even when I came back. Like I was a frail being.
I know,
Yeah.
but I suppose I'd like to acknowledge also that you were open, like you opened yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You shared that with them. You could have come up with some,
Yeah.
you could have told the managers, the senior managers, look,
Yeah.
this is what's happened, but can we keep it quiet? And I want to just say
Yeah.
it's something else. Like you could
Yeah.
have, but you didn't. You
Yeah.
opened up
No,
and
no, no.
allowed that compassion in as well.
Yeah. 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 No, I did. I'm really honest to a point of like I couldn't have said otherwise. And I've always been really open. Yeah, there was other places, employers I couldn't talk about it thereafter. But my last employer, I stood on the stage and told some of this story very publicly, maybe I'd say maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, and just the reception from younger men just blew me away. Just the empathy.
Yeah,
Younger men. My
yeah,
my girlfriend has it. I know what it's like. Or I've seen my girlfriend or my wife has it. We struggled with IVF. So it's now obviously endometriosis is much more out in the public arena now, but back then it definitely wasn't. It wasn't. And to the point I still get calls at least once a month of my friend has just been diagnosed, my friend has surgery. I'm talking to a woman who had a hysterectomy, which we'll get to that shortly. But yeah, like I'm kind of, I suppose I'm now known, and sometimes I don't always want to be known, as oh that's the woman who had endometriosis and didn't have children. I don't want to be known as that, but because I'm so much more, I'm so much more. Um, but it's a part of my story, it's a part of whom I am. Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
for sure.
So where do you want to take us next on the next part of your journey?
I think for those who are listening who might have had it, I'm going to talk about start entering some of the resources that really helped me in those first initial years and those resources that really supported me to become who I am, but also really helped me get well and then make that very difficult decision that I had to make 3 years ago, which was a hysterectomy. So I'll probably go on that journey, if that works for you and your listener,
Mhm.
Susan. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the first thing I did was I found NLP, neuro linguistic programming, back again around maybe late 2000s, early 2001. What are they called? I know the noughties were the noughties. What's the next decade called? I can't remember what they
No
were
idea.
called. But anyway, those years from 2010 kind of onwards. Yeah, maybe after 2010, I found NLP and I did a business practitioner of NLP. And it was the first time that I realized that my thoughts are my world and the power of thinking and beliefs and values. And it was like, I was just like, I'm saying mind blown because my mind was like, oh, what the fuck, I like how I hold myself can determine how I am in the room. Um, Again, it was done in a business context, but there was two kind of big takeaways from that course, and it was I never celebrated myself. I only was like, I'm such an A type person of like, what's next, what's next, what's next. I never stopped to pause and celebrate myself. That was one massive learning in that course. And the other one was, yeah, like my body, how I held myself. and my thinking was kind of my reality. And what if I could change what I was saying could impact everything? And it wasn't power positive thinking. It wasn't like that. Because I think you can have that kind of positive, toxic, kind of nature of everything's great. I'm not like that. But it was just, yeah, it was just this idea that our minds are really powerful. I then kind of found myself back in yoga again. My mother did yoga for 35 years. She was a big Eckhart Tolle woman, big woman into the power now.
She was well ahead of
Um,
herself, wasn't she?
she was well ahead of herself. She really, really was. And so I'd done a little bit of yoga. I dabbled a little bit of yoga in Cork before I moved to Dublin, but I found myself back in yoga and yoga holidays. It was part of my healing. So I'd go on a yoga holiday with other women. Yoga Traveller, who are the people behind the Cliffs of Moher retreat. Michelle and Michael had a company called Yoga Traveller. And I found myself in different retreats around kind of Europe and I'd meet women and they'd start talking about this thing like Reiki. I was like, what's Reiki? And they said, you need to go and see this person. And I remember coming back and booking this woman, and she was my way into Reiki, and she straight away. Do you know when they like the odd healer that you get? They're like, Jesus, no, I don't know if I'd handle you now. You'll have to go down to your one down the road. And I was one of those straight away going, okay, yeah, yeah, you're going to need to go and see. And that was the start of that. And yeah, just finding energy work in my life. And that became this massive resource and allowed me again to see, I suppose, different versions of myself, even past lives and different things and all the things I was carrying. And then got initiated into Reiki 1, 2, and 3, and continued the acupuncture. Would have had successive surgeries after that, all keyhole, all none of them emergency, all like planned. Some were easier than others, and I think one of the latter ones, like I got a marina coil, and again. I'm West meets East. I do both, and I really believe in the power of both. Has really helped me in but I'm really cognizant that every woman has such a unique cycle, a unique body, and unique experience that I'd always encourage other women to find what their resources are. For
Mm.
me, the mix of West and East has really, but if I only go West, it doesn't work. And if I only go East, it doesn't work. I need this kind of liminal space between both. So yeah, always maintain the acupuncture. I had like a Chinese guy for years. He didn't speak a word of English. Dr. Wong, he was renowned in Dublin. You'd go in and he'd be like, no, 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 give it to you. I'm like, we probably had too many gins last night or whatever, because I was still young, like I was in my 30s. Um, but yeah, bit by bit, I was beginning to collect this beautiful kit bag of resources that I could pull on. And there was years where I didn't have a cycle because I was on back-to-back pill or, there was times and that didn't feel right either. I always felt there was years I was single and I always felt I didn't have the right pheromones. Like I could never attract a man because I had numbed my cycles nearly and that never felt right either. I never liked not having my cycle. Even on the Marina Coil, towards the end, I was with somebody at that stage and we had talked about having children, not even getting married. In fact, I never wanted to marry him. I only wanted the babies. So I was meeting all the wrong type of men. And when I say wrong type of men, there was nothing wrong with them. They weren't the person for me. And I really want to say that, I literally had one goal and it was to have a baby. Like that, I was laser focused on that as opposed to meeting the right person for me or me being in a good place to meet anyone. But I really blamed kind of this kind of irregular stop on a cycle for men wouldn't even know if I was ovulating because I've numbed it, like I've eradicated it, like I wouldn't have the right pheromones to attract a man. Like these were the things that the beliefs that I had
Okay.
kind of in my late
Where did
30s in
that come
particular.
from?
I don't know. There was no podcast back then, so I don't know where I read that, but it was something around. It could have even come from some of the Reiki side of things. And again, with the wellness side of things, like I have had acupuncturists that didn't agree with the type of things I was doing for myself at a Western level. And I now way prefer to work with people that know what suits me as opposed to being prescriptive.
Yeah.
Um, um, but yeah, there was something where I didn't feel a woman sometimes,
Hmm.
because I was numbed into not having any period because I couldn't, because if when I did, the pain was so bad. But I got to a really healthy stage, probably 37, 38, where I was like, I wanted to get rid of the marina coil. And I knew I felt really well. I was running, I ran half marathons, I was still doing my acupuncture. I was good in my head, heart, gut. I was really good. I was good on food. My weight was good. So I decided to take out the marina coil and really just see, would I be able to get pregnant? Would I be able to have a normal period? And what would that be like? And because in my mind, the inflammation had kind of gone down to a point that I was like, yeah, let's just see, because I haven't had a real period since I was 27, 28, you know.
I was just going to ask.
Um,
Okay, so you
yeah,
haven't
yeah,
had a period at this stage for 10
for
years.
10 years. Not now when I did, but it was it was chemically induced or
Yeah.
whatever. So I was really intrigued to see the power of the healing, and I had done an awful lot of healing at that stage and different modalities. So yeah, I got the marina out. And that in itself is it's another story. Like it ended up being a surgical removal. It was awful. Um, but yeah, so there was this kind of release of like, okay, let's go. Let's see what happens. And I was in a very unstable relationship, I would say. It was on and then it was off, and then it culminated to he breaking up with me via text, as one does after 2.5 years, and I nearly was sure at that stage I was pregnant, and it was like, oh fuck it, I don't know if I want this because I don't want him. What am I doing here? And I was in absolute shock. And I could feel it, like my body just knew immediately, like that I was pregnant, boobs, you name it. I was like, no. I was really, but I was in an awful way because obviously this whole relationship had broken down. And I'd say around not even 5 weeks later, I miscarried. And it was a relief. It was a relief.
Okay.
And I still think of it, and I never grew any attachment to that baby, or I've never given it a name, or I've like I wouldn't even say I don't know if I have done that just as a safety, or there's part of my head going like, did that actually happen or did it happen? I know it did happen. There was never a positive pregnancy test because I couldn't even bring myself to do one. I just knew it. But
A woman
yeah,
knows. You
a
know.
woman knows. Yeah,
A
I
woman
knew I
knows.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so there was, but anyway, yeah, so it was an early miscarriage, and I threw myself into work. I was like, right, that's it, I'm going to work. And it was a real, like, what am I going to do in my life now? You know, like, I'm not going to be like, that's not happening. I'm not with him. It was less about the baby and it was more about him. And I threw myself into work. And within, I'd say 3 months, I was burnt out. And I had this real crisis of like, what am I going to do with my life? What's this all about? And I had met a friend at work at the time, and she had just qualified as a coach. And I literally, like, I remember stepping up from lunch going, I'm doing that. I'm doing that in September. I'm doing that. I'm gonna train as a coach. I'm gonna do that. And as I started that course, I was like, I'm gonna do IVF on my own. I'm gonna do IVF on my own. That's what I want. It's never about the man. I'm gonna do it on my own. And I remember going, you have to go for counselling, like you have to do this one token tick box counselling thing to
Right.
make sure you've like what fucking just because you're on your own.
Yeah.
Because you're on your own. Like if you wanted to go to Coppers and get pregnant up the duff, do you think you need to go for one count? Like the whole idea of it is fucking insane. But anyway,
It is a tick box exercise.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Uh,
the therapist you go to knows it too, right?
I
There's,
know it's awful. Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, I did that. My mother was give me money and everything she knew about like my desire to do it, and I was all set, and I'd done that, and I hadn't bought the sperm yet, but I'd all the forms filled out and everything, and I was all set to go in that January. And my father rang me one evening around this time of year, 7 years ago, and he said, "Your mother's not well; she's in the regional." And I was like, "What's up?" He was like, "Yeah, they reckon it's in appendicitis or something. She'll be grand. She's just in A&E now, and they're keeping her tonight." And I was like, I'll be down home tomorrow. And it was 2 days before Christmas Eve in 2000, and I get all the dates wrong. She died in 2017, yeah, December 2017. Um, we were told she had grade 4, like she had really, really aggressive bowel cancer. So immediately it was all about like being there for her. And I was like, I'm not doing the IVF thing. That's not happening. I spent every penny that she gave me, probably buying shite to make myself feel okay that Christmas. The money definitely wasn't put aside. Um, and again, this is not the podcast to talk about, what happened there, but I became her advocate carer. I commuted from Dublin down to Limerick 2, 3 times a week and was with her for the next 16 months and she died March 2019. And at this stage, this is how the power of our bodies. I was absolutely fine. My periods were fine. I was really like I was well because I was caring for her. I had to be well.
Yes.
I think the power of the body is incredible. Like I don't remember bad periods during that time. Like yeah, I was well. I was really well. And I well, now there's a photograph of me just before she died that I use in the compare and contrast. I wasn't well, I wasn't breathing, I wasn't doing any self-care, but my body held up. It was
Mhm.
braced itself for 16 months. It
It
braced itself.
held.
It held. It absolutely held. And they say that actually it's not when you're in the eye of the storm,
Mm.
it's the 6 to 18 months afterwards when the adrenals and the cortisol leaves the body that's when often we can get sick.
Okay.
And that's kind of what happened in, I suppose to fast forward it on. I went to do IVF again after my mother died. And actually I fell into the work that I'm now trained into constellations. And I did a map with a coach around would I or wouldn't I, become a mother, and what would that look like because in the absence of my own mother, because she was a full big part of the reason I was going to choose because she was very hands-on with my own brother's kids, who were so her not
She was
being
going to
there.
be your support,
Yeah, she really was. Yeah, she
your
really.
biggest advocate
Yeah.
that you just used and support.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then when she wasn't there, I was like, will I do it? And so really felt I was going to, so I bought sperm around this time of year as well. Like on a Wednesday, and I got a call from my father's friend to say your dad's really not well. My mum was just dead that year. And he had gotten a stroke. And that was that. And I was driving him to Galway, drove down from Dublin in the middle of the night, bundled him into a car, drove him to Galway because Limerick is such a kip. God bless Limerick. And I was in the car and this definitely an energy. It was definitely my mum. It came, descended over the whole car. There was a fog, but it was like this gorgeous sun rising over the fog just outside Galway around Barna. And I remember really feeling my mother there, and I'm like, I'm not going to become a mother. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it to a baby. It's not fair, but I'm also not doing it to myself. This is not about, this is, no, I'm not going to do that. And it was the calm, like he was passed out. I knew he'd be okay because he was still, he was still able to speak and whatever. But it was this calmness descended over the whole car. Like I've never felt anything like it since. Like it was definitely my mother's presence or angels. I don't know what it was, but I just knew in that moment in time that I was going to somehow cope with that idea that I wasn't going to become a mother and this wasn't my path. And we got to the hospital and he was fine and he was absolutely fine. Bulletproof man, West Limerick man. He
That's a
was
huge,
grand.
that's a huge moment though, in the
It was,
midst of obviously
yeah, something
caring.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had such a calm, I had such a knowing. Now, what transpired after that, really, really magnified my choice. My body caught up with and there was grief and all of that. But in that moment, I was like, yeah, this is not the path for me. And that January, I found a lot of deep meditations. I started getting into the work of Joe Dispenza as another resource. And I remember getting up at like for sunrise in the winter or whatever, 7:30, walk on the beach. I live right in front of the beach, just bawling, crying, just grieving that idea of like motherhood is not for me. How can I let it go? And I was really angry at my dad as well. And it was easy. The logical mind was moving into that space of like, oh, if he hadn't had this, I would have done this. Or, it was, again, the rational mind trying to, make sense of your decision.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a time where it was like, right, okay. And then COVID happened. And then we were all thrown into this fucking insanity. I was working for a big corporate. I did team across Europe and I was still studying part time. I was doing more coaching. I was going on to do the next level of coaching, and and it all, yeah, it really like fast forwarding even 2 years after that. But after my mother died, I'd found my other resource was cold water, Wim Hof, the ice baths, breathing, breath work was like kind of a game changer for me around those years as well. And I went full throttle into like more ice, more sea, like you name it. And that was a numbing strategy too. I was talking to
Yeah.
somebody about that yesterday. The ice was able to numb me in a place, and I probably did it to an extreme. I don't do as I do it. I love sea swimming. I still sea swim, but like I was saying yesterday, I was like I'm freezing. Now I don't need to numb myself as much anymore. So, but I enjoy it still, and so yeah. So fast forward 2 years into COVID, my body decided it was time for the endo to rear its ugly head. And I'm not saying it was because I think it was stress as well, but and the vaccine just spurred up, just didn't, again, it's so unique, it's such an individual thing, but it just stirred up something. I also did get COVID very early on, and it was a form of long COVID. It really impacted me. I would be there was times where I was quite having a condition like endometriosis, and I talk about it now in the past tense. I I would pick up bugs very, very easily. Like I was definitely more because of the inflammatory condition where when you're at a low edge, you'd pick up. So I got
Yeah.
COVID very early on, and it was long, not long, long, but it certainly took the stuffing out of me for a good few months. And then whenever that first vaccine, that threw up just a whole episode of really bad periods, really bad pain, and just a whole cycle again, which ended in surgery, let's say the 2000, and I can't even remember the date anyway. And I had to find a new surgeon. You weren't allowed to have any during COVID. I don't know if you know this, but if you had a disease like my own, or you weren't allowed to have any surgeries that were planned or scheduled,
Oh,
not
yeah.
unless it was
Stop that.
cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh,
not unless you had, not unless it was cancer, you couldn't have surgeries. Well, in the public hospital,
yeah.
but Beacon were taking people. So
Oh, okay.
found,
They're private.
yeah, I found a
Yeah.
new GP, and GP wrote a brilliant letter, and I found this new surgeon in the Beacon, and absolutely amazing man. And met him that August, and I had surgery, and he was like, "Yeah, you're in a really bad way, and in fact, you don't just have endometriosis, you have adenomyosis, which is within the womb." And look, it's your choice at the end of the day, but you could possibly consider a hysterectomy. And I remember crying, and the most random thing about my tears were not because I always knew that was going to be in my path. I always knew I would have to have, not have to have, but like that was a strong possibility because during menopause it tends to, and I was still early 40s, remember, like I wasn't, but I probably was perimenopausal from the age of 37 because I had started at 11 as well, and because of all the hormones I was exposed to. So yeah, your man basically, um, I remember crying. Yeah, I was crying. And he was like, "Oh, you don't have to have one." And I was like, "I have to stay in this job that I really don't like for another year." That's all I kept saying. I was like, "I'm going to need time off, and then I can't leave immediately." And I was like, "I'm not going to want to leave." I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to get out, and I was so unhappy in corporate at that stage. I already had found purpose. I'd found the work I really loved and thrived in, and it was the idea that I had to stay in corporate upset me more than the hysterectomy. Like when you think about it, like um but I was so, and it was only in the months, so I had August until January. I had one big surgery, and then the hysterectomy then January, and it'll be 3 years this January. And again, it is not for everyone. And it was so right for me, and I actually did a lot of energetic work on it, and with even people that you and I know in common, and it was like she's ready to go. she's ready to leave and she's ready to make space. Yeah, she's done what she was meant to be here to do, um and I did, yeah. So there was a lot of that was the real grief of not motherhood started to really kick in then, because it was like, even when I said I wasn't going to become a mother, there was this like, oh, sure, I'll meet this amazing guy and, we'll be that miracle woman who has the birth. You hold these little candles of hope all the time. I'll be the one,
Of course
that'll
you do.
get pregnant.
Yeah.
Like you do. And
Yeah.
he's going to be amazing and we're going to have a baby and we're going to prove all science wrong. I was still, although I made a decision, it's the never say never. And, I had all these, like literally a candle, I think, in my room for so many years that the hysterectomy is like it's a death. Like it is so final. It's such a final thing. There is no going back. And because because I had a social media account at that stage, I started sharing the stories and the one sentence, and it still triggers me to today, that people would say, "Oh, but Norma, you're such a mother to everyone. Like you already are a mother." And it is the most triggering sentence, because it's like when people say, "Oh, your mother passed." I'm like, "No, she died." You
Mm.
know, like you want somebody to see you in the finality of it all and acknowledge what you have suffered and the loss that you are now living with for the rest of your life. And people really mean well, right? They really mean well, and they want you to have what they have. And they'll say, yeah, but you're a mother to everyone, and you could be a dog mom, and like, yeah, maybe I will be and whatever. But I'm like, I'm never going to be anybody's mother,
Yeah.
and that's the reality. And I want people to see that in me, that's a part of who I am, and that's a sorrow that I will always carry, and not to sugarcoat it with, but you're such a mother to people. Like I literally and I'm sure it'll be said to me in the future, because it's said to me a lot. And even I was dating a guy last year who had a child, and even I think in some ways he didn't want me to be the child's mother, but he wanted us to be a family unit. But I was very black and white, and I was like, I'm not his mother. He has a mother. Um, and somebody else said, "Oh yeah, I'm so happy for you. I always saw you as a mother. I knew you'd be a mother." I'm like, "I'm not his mother."
Mm.
So it's about when you, and I think it's in our work, Susan, isn't it, that I see everyone when I work with people in their sorrow and their joy and their losses. And I know they're more than all of these things, but I see all aspects of them, because it's never either or. And sadly, for some people, just how they can survive in their world is they want to project something on you so they can make it okay for them. And I'm very much like, but that's not the reality, you know? So yeah, I was with a therapist recently. As a coach, we are in supervision and we have to undertake our own therapy all the time. So the therapist was describing, she was like, "Oh, it's like a mother and the child is in the womb," and I could see her face going blank, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry I said that." And I said, "Don't be sorry." I said, "I talk about my womb space all the time." But I mentioned a baby in the womb, and I said, "Yeah," I said, "that is upsetting, but that's not your fault. Like that's life. That's how we talk about life." She goes, "But I didn't include how that would make you feel." And I said, "Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that, but that's okay. It's okay. Like it's okay. It's like you weren't intentionally saying anything hurtful." But it was so low. We actually ended up having a lovely moment, and of like, yeah, how hard it is for people not to acknowledge something that you've lost. Or that, and the loss and grief isn't always because you lost something, it's because you lost that dream or that hope of something that you've always really, really, really wanted. So yeah.
Yeah. How did you make that decision, Norma? Or was it really, you said you always had a sense that it might come to that, but how did
Mm. I think I was in so much pain, firstly, right? Pain will drive you to do anything. I was in a really bad way, like at the time as well. So, and the thought of that being gone, like that weight, like,
you
to be actually gone, that was definitely an easy decision to make. Um, I don't like, I don't. I don't know why I always thought that it was going to be a part of. I probably thought it was going to be something I would have to have, but I might have had children before that,
Yeah,
that kind of way.
yeah, yeah.
That it was something that would happen later in life. Um, it's not that my mother had a hysterectomy or anything, but um,
But if it, I
I
guess
don't know.
if that was always, if there was all
There,
those, yeah. Uh,
yeah,
and also what I'm hearing is, yes, you made the decision that actually you couldn't carry on the way you were carrying on and that you
no,
needed to have it, but at the same time you weren't making the decision not to have become a mother or
no,
not to have a
no,
child. They're two different
exactly.
things,
They're
right?
two very different things. Yeah.
The same way as when somebody, let's say, and I know another woman that like she now has three children, but
Hmm.
they're not her own, right? She's a mother figure to three children.
Yeah,
And you can still love the children as,
absolutely.
but it's let me get my words. It's and it's not a number two choice. It's not a
No.
second hand love, but it's not you haven't nurtured and carried and grown,
Yeah,
and then birthed a child, and then
yeah.
in the like the energy of even
The
like
exchange of,
yeah,
yeah.
and mothering that or like bringing
Mm.
that child into the world. They're two very different things, and it's
Yeah.
not that you can't love someone else's child.
Be a mother figure, I think, yeah, what you
Yes,
said there. Or
yeah,
I'm all about stepping into
mm,
a mother figure for that person,
yeah,
for those children. And I know, and I think we know a similar woman who's, yeah, she's mothering children that aren't hers either. But she does love them, of course she loves them, but it wouldn't be the same as if it was your own child. So yeah, and I did like there was asked times where I would have considered adoption and different things or surrogacy, and it just never felt right. It never felt right.
mm,
Um, I always had imagined myself being pregnant. Like I had imagined that too, and as well, I think there was a part to me now I am that I both have the silver linings as well. Don't get me wrong, it's not all sorrow. Like it's the Jesus, I can choose to be on this podcast after a certain hour and not have to get up and feed kids or collect them for creches or, you know, one reason actually, and it reminds me why one of the decisions I did make was I knew while I was still in corporate, I had the support, monetary support to take the time off. And I really knew for a long time that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and have my own business. That was part of my decision to do my hysterectomy when I did do it as well, that I would be supported monetarily by another body, like my former employer, and that I would then, if I didn't have that pain, I could create a business. So that again was a huge silver lining. And I do a public talk now and I talk about creating space, creative space to create something. And for me, sadly, or fortunately, whatever way, whatever perspective I have on a given day, it can be both. I did lose my womb to make way for that creative space. But the one good thing, and that's why I connect with my womb space so much to the point that I do energetically still feel it there in the best possible way.
mhm,
And even as I touch it now, it's like I did work to restore its energy there. So I reinstated the best version of my womb, in there. So I do feel really womanly. I really worried would I be a woman, and I did go into sudden menopause as well. And again has been Western meets Eastern. I do both Chinese herbs and I do HRT and feels some days I didn't get a choice in that because it was so sudden. Whereas if I'd gone through a natural menopause, I mightn't have done HRT. I wouldn't sleep. I wouldn't exist. I wouldn't. I really,
yeah,
really need it.
yeah,
It's been a huge support. But again, I'm very much, it's not for everyone. It really isn't for everyone. And I really respect that.
yeah,
What's right for you, it has to feel right for you. But back to the motherhood side of it, I still journey with the loss and the grief and the finality. It is like a death. It's so final. The minute that womb was gone, there's no hope. There's no candle. It's not happening.
yeah.
And the medical profession is fucking awful because I ended up having some heart surgery. That's another story. I have a valve, and I needed a valve in my heart. Nothing got to do with anything. Totally separate thing that just again revealed itself recently, and they wanted me to do a pregnancy test. You're like, fuck off. And that has happened
What?
more times than I
I don't
wished.
understand. What? Did I not
Yeah.
know you've had a hysterectomy?
Yes. Yes, they would. And only for
That's
it was yeah, and the other nurse, it was an Irish nurse with another nurse that didn't have English as her native language, and it was like, she can't be. She was like, but you know, it's this, they have this checklist box and they need to check the box. I've seen them, elderly women in the Beacon, being asked to do a pregnancy test. You're like, honestly, like just medical, like insanity sometimes. But
yeah,
yeah, recently, like your one had to go. She can't be. She hasn't a womb. Like she cannot be. You can't ask her that. And only for the other, there was two nurses in the room. I was so glad to have the other one. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? So there's so many times that, um, you know, it's that question when you're writing about, oh, and do you have children? You know,
yes, I do know that question also.
you know that question, Susan. Yeah. And like you take a breath and like you really don't know what to say sometimes. You know, it's like, oh, I have nieces and a nephew that I love and adore. You
I
know,
just say
it's
no.
like,
I just,
and leave it there and pause.
I literally say no. I don't. And it depends then who I'm with. Like if it's like I met some
Yeah.
people because I've moved area, right? At the
Yeah.
moment, I moved into our new home and just meeting new people, introducing ourselves to,
Yeah.
and it's like it's a question. It's like no, I don't. And I don't leave it open to any more. And it's not, and I don't, it's pure like it's just conversation from their perspective. Like it is
Yeah, it is.
genuinely
They
know
want to
that
put you into a box and they can access that part of you if you are or you aren't. You know,
it's
it's
well, it's a
like,
connection point. I see
yeah, it is.
it, the way
Yeah,
I see it is as a
it
connection point.
is.
I
Yeah.
don't mind it, and it depends who asks.
Yeah.
I'll give more information if I feel like that
Yeah, if you feel safe
feel like I
enough.
want a connection, a deeper
Yeah.
connection rather than the surface level. But
Mm.
generally, I just go, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And
And
silence
yeah.
for a
Yeah.
second, 5 second silence.
Yeah, yeah.
Then
Whereas I'm bold, I am really controversial. Like I am, like I crack a whip in it, and I go, no, I couldn't have children. As and I leave silence there as well, and you
mm,
get the head tilt of, oh, I'm so sorry, um, and that's me being controversial bitch as well. Like that's not fair on them because they don't see that coming. Um, but the odd time you do kind of want to just kind of go like, I just want to fuck go there, and like, yeah, just say, no, I don't. But it really, yeah, it just depends on the room and the reception. And I do definitely do with a shock value. That's on me. That's it's not a good trait. But yeah, it is. It's how how I will travel with my own grief in later in life. And I see it with elderly people I work with. Even doing like the work I do now in retreats on grief and loss, the losses are magnified. They can be if we're not resourced or we don't, like, I continue to journey with the loss, by getting support from people that I need at a given time, So yeah.
it was 3 years ago you had the hysterectomy.
3 years ago in January, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you think there's an uh, a point where there'll be acceptance, or do you think it's going to be waves of like when I think about, let's say our age group then becoming parents or becoming
Mm,
grandparents, right?
mm.
There's
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah,
maybe
there'll
your
be
age.
another wave. There'll be another
Yeah,
wave. Yeah, there'll be
yeah.
another wave. And actually, I have friends of all ages. So I have friends that their kids are nearly 30, and I have friends that are, had IVF and they're very smallies, like they've less than toddlers, and some of them still even in IVF cycles. Like I have all cycles of friends. Um, so yeah, yeah. I think you can have glimmers of acceptance for sure, and I definitely had some this year, like where like I'm like, geez, I couldn't have had a shot. Like I couldn't have. I like my lions and I like my independence and I like my traveling and I love my business and I love my clients and I don't think I could do what I do now if I had. So, I'm very grateful some aspects, and there is an acceptance within that. Um, but I think like the Kubler-Ross, cycles, I think you nothing is stagnant. I think you
Mm.
journey through them, and they're not linear. So I think you could have a day where you're angry, or you could have a day that you're, bargaining is one of the Kubler-Ross stages, and acceptance. But I think, yeah, I think you'll continue to travel with them. I don't think it changes. Like I know on the anniversary of my hysterectomy, I'll celebrate my good health now. Like I was with my menopause consultant today, ironically enough, and she's just like look at you, like look how far you've come, like
Mm.
um and and it's lovely because we don't see our own growth always,
Mm.
but we see it through the eyes of somebody that might only see us once, twice a year or whatever. And like that same consultant, I've interviewed her on my own podcast, and she's done Wim Hof and she's into Joe Dispenza, and she's really open to all the modalities and energy and everything, which is, you can imagine the great conversations we have. And she loves to see me coming because I'm a bit of crack, and I've come out the other side, and I'm still grateful for that support. But I can't stress enough how this is my story, and there's somebody listening to this that has their own unique story to not becoming a mother. And again, leaving room for women who've chosen not to become a mother as well. And there's still grief in that as well. Because there's choices. And again, it's other people's projections on their choices that can trigger their own cycle of grief in as well. So I'm leaving room for other women to come and share their story with you, Susan, because it's such a unique thing, and it's uniquely felt for you, but it's also, yeah, your worldviews, your values, everything, your beliefs and your upbringings, how that can impact on your decisions, your grief, your what you will journey with for your the rest of your life. So um this is my story, and this is very unique to me, but there's such an expansiveness to, there's room for all of us to share, our unique journeys. And in that, there'll be parts of the story that you can identify for yourself, but other people will be, yeah, taking the parts that actually, no, I'm not going to do HRT. And I'll say, because that will work for you, and
Mm.
allow space for that.
Yeah.
Really knowing. I think I was very, at the start, everybody in menopause should go on HRT. I was a bit like that at the start. And now I've learned that, like, no, I'm like, oh my God, just like my journey and my cycle, like there's room for all of it. And it's, women allowing women to have their own seasons and their own resources, and what, because we're so unique. We're so unique.
Yeah. And
Mm,
each woman has their own story within that as well. I think that's
100%.
where I think that's where, like, with not being a mother, and I used to often think about the women that were in that position when I would look at it from a different perspective
Mm,
of, let's say, when I originally made a choice not to have, I thought I didn't, I originally didn't want to, I thought I didn't want to have children in my 30s. And looking at women then that maybe couldn't, and thinking, oh my God, they must be thinking about it all day long and it must be really tough. And all these stories that we project onto, we have no
exactly.
idea what each woman is going through, whatever happens in her life. Because look, some of this just happens. You have no choice in some of this. Yes, we can
Yeah.
influence it a little bit. We can influence things, but
Yeah.
ultimately there's a divine, I believe, this is my belief, it's not everyone's, that there's a divine order to things. And there's some of it
Same.
we
Yeah.
just can't influence. There's some of it we cannot. Um, and so, there's I think, and that's part of the reason for doing these episodes, is that we, I guess we meet each woman where she is, and we
Yeah.
allow her to speak to her story without, without knowing all the story, even hearing,
Mm.
we've just
Yeah.
heard part of your story today.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And just
Exactly.
allowing that to be, actually,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
to, um,
And
and I,
it's on a given day, on a day where, I'd feel strong, or like if you had this exact same conversation with me this day 3 years ago when I was about to enter into the hysterectomy, how different that would have been.
Mm.
Like I would have been filled with loss and fear and all of that.
Mm.
And that she's still a part of me, and I have
Yes.
to honor her.
Yeah.
Because we could all sugarcoat when you're at the outside, when you're on the other side of a beginning. Like I talk about endings, and you get through the ending, and the ending doesn't bring you straight into beginning, it brings you through a transition.
Mm.
And in that transition, or I also call it liminal space, and it can be called a neutral space, is the hard valley of shit, like
Mm.
that you go through before a beginning starts. And I have gone through those valleys and those dark days and overcome many boulders to get to this space that I'm in now. But my story brings through all the cycles and all the seasons. And it's like meeting somebody on a different day in their menstrual cycle. They'll be very different from, a day where they're full of energy. And I think I now, because I don't have cycles per se, the moon is my cycle.
You do have, yeah.
Yeah, I do, but
Okay.
it's as in,
Different. Yeah.
yeah, it's very different. And I go by the Celtic wheel as well, and the moon. And I'm so lucky because I live by the sea. I have tides, right? So
Mm.
like we've tides every day, changing every day. So,
Yeah.
and new moons and full moons, like I know all about that now, way more than I ever did because of my sea swimming.
Yeah.
Because water is
Yeah.
such a brilliant resource for our cycles and where we're at, and wind. My God, wind. Like you think the west coast is windy until you live in the east coast, and the northeasterlies during the winter.
Well, you're glowing today. So if anyone is looking
Thank
on,
you.
if anyone's watching this on YouTube, you're glowing.
Thank you.
And where you and I remember, because I visited once with my sister, didn't we? We went to
Yeah,
car. She's coming
yeah.
next April again, actually.
Yes, she was
And I
amazing.
remember it wasn't. I don't think it was too long afterwards. It's probably a year or
Mm,
two.
yeah,
And where you are now, and
yeah,
as you say, on any given day as well.
yeah,
You're th
yeah,
it feels like you're thriving. And I
yeah.
guess I want to, before we finish up, because I'm conscious of time, is there anything that you want to, I had a question. Yeah, is there anything that you wish people would know about any part of the journey you've spoken about today, or any aspect of it that you would like to change in terms of not how it would be seen, as in how you would change how it's seen or perceived.
Yeah. I think one thing I'd love to tell other women is just because you have found a doctor or a surgeon or anybody when it comes to a disease like endometriosis or anything, actually, even a cancer diagnosis, you trust your own body.
Mhm.
When somebody gives you a finality on a decision like that, you need to go away and you don't have to make a decision in a doctor's office. There was many a time I was made feel really bad in doctor's surgeries, whether, I was dismissed or yeah, surgeries were booked that I didn't want or I didn't understand. Um, like it's your body and you, like if I was to go back to that 28-year-old who was so like just accepting of what any doctor said to her,
Mm.
whereas like now I advocate and help women going into doctor surgeries, and I allow them to feel way more empowered to ask the right questions and not to be allowed to be dismissed about their pain if they're really suffering. And that's to any healthcare provider. Actually, it doesn't just need to be a surgeon or a doctor. Um, and it's not biased to men or women because they both can do it. Like I've experienced it.
Yeah,
So I think there is something around if you're suffering, and it doesn't need to even necessarily be around this story, but in any way, and your body knows something doesn't feel right. Like if you don't feel strong enough, bring somebody with you or write it down on your notes. On the day that you feel really bad, make a note of that and write what that feels like and read that aloud and allow them to really hear because the days you feel bad, especially in a bad cycle, and then by the time you get to the doctor, you feel okay, so you might
yeah,
dismiss it, especially with something like endometriosis. Make the notes, make what it feels like, and really, really, really stand in your power because your body wants you to advocate for yourself. And that's with acupuncturists, that's with anybody who's in your kit bag of resources that they might dismiss you. And because I was dismissed for so long and I was told it was all in my head. And I was suffering, and it got so bad that I ended up with such like, yeah, a really traumatic surgery that didn't need to be that way. So it was any I don't have any regrets. My life has unfolded the way it's meant to. It makes me very grateful for my health now. Like, I don't wake up in pain anymore. I've pains and aches from the gym or doing too much lifting, or being tired or whatever. I now know what my body needs. And I'm so grateful for that now. I have such more respect for my body, and even my little heart incident recently has made me cop on with the cholesterol. And it's like I've got a new heart again with a new valve, and it's like it was another wake up call to step into caring for myself and nourishing myself even more so. And nourishment isn't just food and exercise. It's people, it's energy, it's places, it's music, it's nature. It's like resource yourself well for what your body and head, heart, and gut need. And allow, if you don't know what your resources are, allow yourself to receive them, because they'll come your way when you're ready. The teacher shows when the student is ready. Yeah, there you go. That's it.
If anyone would like to thank Norma, actually, if you want to message her or thank her or ask her any questions, she's Norma O'Kelly, Norma O'Kelly, systemic coach. I'll share your Instagram.
Perfect. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your
Thank you.
story. I know it will touch the hearts of women. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and continued success on this series. And I would encourage a woman who hasn't ever shared her story to come on board, because when I shared this story a few years ago, it was the change in me, because we're not alone and we all have unique stories. And it's not about finding your voice. You have a beautiful voice, and share it with others. So thank you, Susan, for doing this work, and best of luck to all your next guests. Thank you.
Thanks, Norma. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing. Every share, like, and subscribe to this podcast means another woman gets to find this wisdom and return back home to herself. So until next week, have a wonderful time and look after yourself.